Morning, my name is Josh from CyclonesOZ and here is your Australia forecast update for March 18th, 2025. Around Australia we've got some rainfall up in far North Queensland that's delivered some very heavy accumulations because of a developing low pressure system in the Gulf of Carpentaria. Let's dive into the details on that system right now. You can see heavy rain streaming into far North Queensland this morning. We've had some incredible rainfall accumulations overnight since about midnight actually around the Paloma Dam and Rollingston area where rainfall has been up to around 300 millimetres overnight. We've had significant rainfall accumulations as well along the coastline up the Cassowary coast and even up towards the Daintree rainforest as well. Widespread falls between 50 up to about 150 millimetres. Down in Townsville we've also had about 80 millimetres overnight, so the rainfall has been widespread and quite heavy as well. It was nothing what other forecast models were suggesting. We did have some predictions suggesting up around that 700 or 800 millimetre mark from the Access convective forecast model. That was never going to come into fruition, and I'm very glad that it didn't come into fruition, but we're waking up this morning to some pretty big puddles up in far North Queensland, and I imagine some minor to moderate riverine flooding is going to eventuate. Already rainfall accumulations over the last week are starting to approach 1,000 millimetres around the Babinda and the Tully area, and with a few more heavy showers and downpours expected today, especially into the morning and then again later on this afternoon. We are expecting that 1,000 millimetre mark to be broken for those week-long rainfall accumulations up in far North Queensland. Certainly has been a wet week as the monsoon activity returns up there. You can see over in the Gulf of Carpentaria we've got that low pressure system beginning to spin itself up as well, and that is one of the driving factors behind a lot of this rainfall up in far North Queensland. You can see from some of the wind observations now suggesting a very broad low pressure system beginning to develop in the Gulf of Carpentaria, down around the Mornington Island area with a concentrated low pressure system still not developed at this time, but we're certainly starting to see some signs that we've got a low pressure system here. And in fact, if we fast forward it right to the latest radar frame, if you've got an eagle eye, you'll notice a swirl down here in the clouds. That is indicative of a low pressure system beginning to develop here. You can see that swirl where the cursor is, but again, that's not actually a tropical low at this time. Let's jump into the forecast aspect now and see what's coming through. You can see immediately speaking, we've got a couple of heavy showers offshore from Hinchbrook Island heading down towards Palm Island. Accumulations there looking at around 40 to 50 millimetres an hour, and still some heavy rainfall to come over the next couple of hours for the Cairns area and down the Cassowary coast just in general. The rainfall is going to be coming in from the north towards the northeast today, so expecting some heavy falls around the Cairns area, especially throughout the remainder of this morning. The eastern left forecast model is one that we're going to be using. You can see those showers continuing for far North Queensland and even down towards North Queensland as well. We're expecting heavy rain to continue around that bend area between Cardwell down towards Townsville, which means Rollingston and the Paloma Dam area are going to be receiving some heavy showers throughout the remainder of today. And in fact, heavy rainfall is expected around the Townsville area throughout the remainder of today as well, especially into tonight where we will be seeing some widespread heavy showers. Along a surface trough that's expected to develop along the coastline as well, a very tight low pressure system will develop, and that's going to extend out into a surface trough that's going to extend out in an easterly fashion into the Coral Sea. We're expecting some moderate to heavy showers tending to moderate rainfall at times for the North Queensland coastline between Townsville down towards Mackay, and there is a chance that later tonight into early tomorrow morning that we see some significant rainfall accumulations around the Mackay area. Also some significant rainfall accumulations possible into the Proserpine area as well. You can see as we push this forecast forward, you can see those heavy showers and storms not really clearing out until later tomorrow afternoon, and still heavy rainfall expected along the Cassowary coast through tomorrow afternoon and into early Thursday morning as well. For the most part though, it looks like beyond Thursday the rainfall will clear out. There will still be some heavy showers here and there through Thursday and in towards Friday, but with the weakening off of that low pressure system as it heads further inland from the Gulf of Carpentaria, it looks like that rainfall will then move out of the north and the far North Queensland coastlines and will return to just a few patchy showers here and there. Pushing the forecast down throughout the remainder of March, it doesn't look like there's too much in the way of rainfall until another tropical low pipes up in the Gulf of Carpentaria, which the forecast models are a little bit iffy on, and I'll get to that in the later part of the forecast update, but you can see that there might be a little bit of rainfall returning into the last couple of days of March, but again, the forecast for this looking very uncertain at this time. Between the Eastern West and the GFS forecast models, there are quite a few discrepancies, but in terms of rainfall over the next couple of hours and into the next couple of days, some good accumulations are possible for a lot of locations. You can see this is the forecast for the next 72 hours for North Queensland, the heaviest falls being around that Big Bend area between Cardwell down towards Townsville on the southern side of the Cassowary coast, so including locations such as Ingham, Halifax and Lucinda, which could all pick up accumulations on top of what they've already received of about 250 to 300 millimetres. That'd be at a worst case scenario. The majority of locations are going to be seeing between 150 out to about 250 millimetres, with the exception being around Paloma Dam, Paradise Lagoon and Rollingston, which could be seeing some accumulations of around that 300 millimetre mark on top of the 300 millimetres that they have copped last night. Significant falls also possible around Townsville, especially into the hills south of Townsville, where we could be seeing rainfall accumulations up around that 250 millimetre mark, and rainfall accumulations between 100 to 200 millimetres possible down between Townsville as far south as Mackay, with isolated falls up to 300 millimetres possible possible around Proserpine into some of the hills there. It really does depend on what direction the rainfall comes in. If it does swing around to the southeast, heavier falls can be expected around Proserpine, but if it remains from the east, the rainfall will be marginally lighter. Still, some heavy falls are possible as a result of this. And just to illustrate my point that the convective forecast models are getting things very wrong here, this is the Access convective forecast model, and because we're looking at this from the perspective that a lot of showers and thunderstorms are going to be developing, which is because of the nature of the weather event up here, the convective forecast models take those showers and those thunderstorms and they take them up to the 9th level. So this is a look at what the Access is expecting in terms of rainfall, and you can see some monster accumulations of around that 1200 millimeter mark throughout the remainder of today. Of course, need I say any more that this is complete bogus and not going to materialize? That's for sure. That's some insane rainfall accumulations. But for those that are making their own forecasts and looking at windy.com, just steer clear of the convective forecast models unless you know exactly what to look for. And in this case, the convective forecast models are sprouting a whole load of boogies at this time. It's just not going to materialize the rainfall accumulations like this. Week-long accumulations could be up to around that 1100 millimeter mark, but 24-hourly accumulations are not going to be anywhere near that mark. So again, I don't want people to be panicking because they're making their own forecasts and making innocent mistakes around some of the numbers that some of the forecast models are sprouting in terms of rainfall. Pushing the forecast forward, you can see a bit of a tropical low is expected to develop in the Gulf of Carpentaria much later on into the forecast period. We're expecting the initial tropical low to then move inland to the Northern Territory and make way for another bit of a rainfall event. We're going to see that rainfall depression develop in the Gulf of Carpentaria associated with that monsoon, but it looks like later on into the forecast we will see sometime around the 25th to the 28th of March something develop in the Gulf of Carpentaria, whether it's a very elongated tropical low or a tighter tropical low. Still a lot of discrepancies in the forecast, and you can see between major forecast models there's really no congruency at this time. But for the Gulf of Carpentaria, plenty of rainfall expected over the next 14 days, plenty of rainfall as well expected for the top end of the Northern Territory, and over the next couple of days we're expecting showers and storms to dominate the scene into interior parts of the Northern Territory and also parts of Western Queensland as well. You can see right throughout the remainder of this week some heavy rainfall expected into the western half of Queensland, especially around that Mount Isa, Corumba, Georgetown, Croydon sort of area as well, expecting some pretty significant falls in those locations. Mount Isa itself shouldn't be seeing anything over about 100 millimeters, but out towards this weekend a bit of a funnel of thunderstorms heading down towards Cloncurry and Julia Creek could be on the cards down there. Rainfall also expected to be moderate to heavy at times through parts of the Northern Territory and also in towards Western Australia, where the tropical cyclone forecast is now becoming a little bit more apparent. So right now we don't really have anything beginning to develop, but we are starting to see some more cloud activity offshore around the Cocos-Keeling Islands and out towards West Island through Christmas Island through here. And this tropical activity here, this is associated with the developing monsoonal low, which is then going to wrap itself up into a tighter tropical low. And you can see that on the forecast models right now. If we take a look at the wind forecast, there is already something starting to develop here. Not a tight low pressure center, but something really beginning to get its act together at this time. Now this is expected over the next couple of days to just meander around. It's going to be connected to a very elongated monsoon trough, and as such rainfall will be spreading out, and we're expecting some strong thunderstorms to be developing along this monsoonal trough out into the ocean. And whether or not these get themselves over land, it's still a little bit uncertain at this time, but especially in towards the later parts of this week we could be seeing some heavy rainfall and severe thunderstorms developing across the Pilbara region of Western Australia through Thursday, Friday and in towards Saturday night along the coastline. And that's when we're going to see another low pressure system begin to develop on the other side of the trough here. And it's not uncommon that we see this sort of pattern unfold across the tropics of Western Australia, especially offshore from the Pilbara region. We can see two tropical lows develop very close together at the same in the same period of time, and that's exactly what we're seeing here. We're expecting a bit of a low pressure system to develop by around Thursday or Friday just offshore from the Pilbara coastline before heading down to the Pilbara coastline, because these systems will then begin orbiting around each other, rotating around each other. And this system, whilst it doesn't get to tropical cyclone status, it will certainly provide a bit of a soaking through Saturday and Sunday for the parts of the Pilbara coastline between Carnarvon up to about Broome. So a very uncertain forecast still here, and it looks like these low pressure systems eventually interact with each other enough to actually become one solid low pressure system. A common misconception with the Fujiwara effect, which is where two tropical cyclones merge into each other, is that the energy is compounding, and it looks like the tropical cyclone will then become double what the initial intensity was, or the cyclone's intensity kind of gets added onto one another. I'm not sure the best way to explain this, but that just isn't the case. What happens is these tropical cyclones, because of the interaction, both their low pressure systems get ripped apart initially, which means that they both weaken substantially. The Fujiwara effect is very unhealthy for tropical cyclones. It's like binge drinking, it is. That's kind of the best way to describe it. So these tropical cyclones will be ripped apart from the inside out, and even if they aren't developed, then the low pressure systems will be, of course, course much weaker, and then by the looks of things heading back out to sea or heading maybe briefly towards Western Australia. Still very hard to tell for the Pilbara coastline. There are a lot of discrepancies between the forecast models and a lot of ways that this forecast could go. You can see the GFS bringing it offshore. One thing's for sure, offshore from the Pilbara coastline, it looks exceedingly likely now to the last week of March that we will see tropical low or tropical cyclone activity, whether it's off the Kimberley region, whether it's off the Pilbara region, and whether it's earlier on in the forecast or later on in the forecast. It's still a little bit too early and a little bit difficult to tell considering the amount of solutions that the forecast models are giving out right now. There are just so many discrepancies. So, like I said, very difficult to tell at this time, and only time will tell what actually does develop here. But this weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, expecting a low pressure system to develop offshore from the Pilbara coastline. The bit of meteorology is giving that a 20% chance of development into a tropical cyclone. I think that's pretty generous at this time. I highly doubt that anything tropical cyclone in nature develops in the next week or so offshore from the Pilbara coastline, but it certainly could be a bit of a rainmaker, and I think regardless we will start to see this weekend an enhancement of thunderstorms and shower activity along the Pilbara coastline between Broome down to Carnarvon, with an emphasis on locations between Exmouth and Karratha. The major forecast models have been suggesting that for the last couple of days now, and especially with what the Eastern Weather forecast model is suggesting in terms of rainfall accumulations, it certainly looks like it could be quite healthy here. Some pretty healthy rainfall numbers all round on the Eastern Weather forecast. If this does come into fruition here, we'll certainly be seeing one of the wettest weeks on record for the Pilbara coastline, with rainfall accumulations up around that 500 or 600 millimetre mark. And I think the one takeaway that we can take away from this forecast model here is between the major forecast models, we're expecting a week-long period of some pretty significant rainfall accumulations, just steady stuff developing across the northern parts of WA. And whether that does end up in the Pilbara or whether that does end up in the Kimberley region, still a little bit too early to tell. I imagine we'll have answers on this system by tomorrow or by Thursday at the absolute latest. I know that's cutting things fine, but we're not talking about a developing severe tropical cyclone situation here, so I feel comfortable in letting this fester a few more days so that we get the most accurate forecast out of it. But depending on the movement and the development of these two tropical lows here, whether they do connect or whether they stay individual is going to have major ramifications on what rainfall and impacts can be expected across the Kimberley region. One thing's for sure is we're expecting some pretty significant rainfall for both for the Kimberley region. The Pilbara region, not so much at this time. It's still a little bit of an uncertain forecast at this time. And yeah, that basically does it for the tropics this morning. It certainly looks like we've got a bit of rainfall as well on the cards across other parts of Australia, especially later on into the forecast period. You can see much later on. We do have a little bit of rainfall developing across the Gippsland region of Victoria and in towards New South Wales as well. It certainly is going to start to feel like winter pretty shortly with some of the cold fronts that are coming through. We're going to see some showers and thunderstorms initially speaking over New South Wales though in or tomorrow afternoon and into tomorrow evening, and then showers and thunderstorms also expected through Victoria and parts of New South Wales, some of which could be severe through parts of Victoria through Thursday night and towards Friday night as well. Showers and thunderstorms then moving into the northeast of New South Wales by this weekend, and a few showers and thunderstorms expected to be widespread through South Australia. It'll be a return to the cooler, calmer and dry conditions across parts of Victoria and New South Wales throughout the weekend and in towards early next week before another cold front blows through. We see a couple more thunderstorms and showers moving through parts of New South Wales and Victoria, and it looks like we could be seeing a pretty strong cold front impact through Monday night into towards Tuesday morning for Tasmania as well, with isolated heavy rainfall expected across the west coast, which is not unusual this time of the year, that's for sure, but we will certainly be seeing some heavy falls down there, and it looks like some heavier rainfall also expected across interior parts of New South Wales through next Wednesday and Thursday, and it looks like what the forecast models have been suggesting over the last couple of days is a cold chord system. I mean, the major forecast models are still pretty undecided on this system here, but a bit of a cold chord system developing in either the Tasman Sea, which could be reminiscent of an east coast low, which means we could be talking about a bit of rainfall and some stormy impacts for New South Wales and Victoria. Now, as we push this forecast forward in towards late March, it is prime time for East Coast low development. This is the time of the year when they are going to happen and when they will be strong. Still some warm sea temperatures, but it's certainly starting to get a little bit cooler across parts of Victoria and New South Wales. Now, I actually noticed it yesterday over in Western Australia, heading out into the daytime. It was still warm in the sun. It was a top of 31 degrees yesterday and a very pleasant day, that's for sure. But heading out into the shade, it was substantially cooler than it has been over the last couple of months. So winter is coming, that's for sure. And I want everybody to be aware of that because it is now prime time condition for these East Coast lows through parts of New South Wales, Victoria and Tasmania. And whilst I'm not saying that an East Coast low is expected on the forecast at this time, it certainly is possible as we push the forecast forward in towards late March. And you can see this system here, very much reminiscent of an East Coast low. Significant waves, a very deep low pressure system, and also some strong winds as well expected on the backside of this system. Interesting stuff, that's for sure, as we push the forecast later on. You can see also much later on into the forecast period, whilst we could be seeing tropical cyclones cyclone activity in the Coral Sea. It's not looking overly likely at this time. There have been rumbles of activity over the last couple of forecast runs, but we're not seeing it this morning in any of the forecast modelling, that's for sure. And whilst late March is certainly still prime time for tropical cyclone activity, as we start heading towards early April, we begin to expect things to calm down over parts of the Coral Sea and into the Gulf of Carpentaria as well. This wet season will run for longer than usual over in North Queensland as well. We're not expecting the rainfall to properly pipe down in towards late May for the Cassowary Coast at the absolute earliest, and we're still expecting some heavy falls here and there right throughout April. So the wet season still has a couple more weeks. In fact, it's probably got a couple more months actually to kick around for parts of North Queensland. So I want everybody to be aware of that, and certainly the chance of tropical cyclones cannot be ruled out at this time. But as we start to look into the forecast, or the long-range forecast on the models in towards early April, and we're not seeing tropical cyclone development or hints of tropical cyclone development, it's beginning to look a lot more likely that we're not looking at a tropical cyclone impact for North Queensland at this time. Again, tropical cyclones can and they will happen at any time on a very short amount of notice for the Coral Sea and in towards Queensland. They're notoriously hard to predict as well, so everybody needs to keep their guard up across North Queensland until the official end of tropical cyclone season, or until we can say safely that there isn't any tropical cyclone activity expected on the cards. And right now, nothing expected out towards the 1st of April, but it certainly doesn't look like that is completely writing off tropical cyclone activity for the remainder of tropical cyclone season 24-25, which has been an impressive season to say the least. Certainly some record-breaking systems, one of the most active seasons in recent history as well, and certainly some very interesting and very difficult storms to track, that's for sure. Anyways, on that note, I'm going to have to wrap this video up here. It's been a bit of a shorter one with a bit of a different style where we quickly go through things, and I'm not sure how people are going to take to that, so if you could give me some feedback in the comment section down below, I'd be more than happy to return to the original style of going really far into depth about parts of the weather situation there, but I'm not sure how long people want to watch these videos for. But yeah, any feedback is more than welcome in the comment section down below as well, and there's a community poll also active, so make sure you check that out too. Anyways, that is all from me, and I'll catch you all in the next storm. A special shout out to the channel sponsors, of course, as well. I completely forgot about that, but I'll catch you all in the next storm. Goodbye.